Welcome back to the Ed Show. The crowd that brought us the war in Iraq, they're back for more. Now they want a surge in Afghanistan. It's the usual suspects, McCain, Condi, and our old friend Joe Lieberman. And the same old line, the war is the only way to keep us safe. They didn't even change the script. Take a listen.
We need additional troops, and the longer we wait and delay, the more Americans will be put at risk unnecessarily.
Our national security interests are very much tied up in not letting Afghanistan fail again and become a safe haven for terrorists. It's that simple. If you want another terrorist attack in the United States, abandon Afghanistan.
When we sent more troops in, we turned it around. Iraq's now rising up on its own. Now people support the war in Iraq, and it's a much lesser concern. We're capable of doing that in Afghanistan, and if we don't, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda will be back there from which they struck us on 9/11.
We've heard it all before. Joining me now is Robert Greenwald, director of the Brave New Films production, Rethink Afghanistan. Robert, good to have you back with us tonight. Before we start our discussion, I do want to play this exclusive excerpt that you've made available to us in exchange here. Here it is.
Focusing on what our original goal was, which was to get Al-Qaeda, the people who killed 3,000 Americans.
Al-Qaeda is no longer in Afghanistan. They are not in Kandahar. They are not out in the desert. They are not in any part of Afghanistan. They've moved, but we are still fighting a war that the enemy's not even there. It's crazy.
No Al-Qaeda at all in Afghanistan. Is that an exaggeration, General Petraeus, or is that true?
No, I would agree with that assessment.
To the extent that our strategy in Afghanistan is serving that goal, then we're on the right track. If it starts drifting away from that goal, then we may have a problem.
And the latest development on Afghanistan today, General Petraeus has endorsed General McChrystal's request for more troops. Mr. Greenwald, what do you make of all of this?
Well, it was pretty clear that that was going to happen. I mean, when you go to the military, the military's going to ask for more troops. You go to a surgeon, surgeon's going to say operate. The sad thing, Ed, and the tragic thing is, having been in Afghanistan, and you go to the third poorest country in the world, they desperately need things, but they don't need to be occupied. They need jobs, they need schools, they need doctors, they need teachers. We could supply all those things, but we're not going to supply them, and we're not going to make ourselves safer by going to a military solution. We have, as you heard in the clip, CIA experts who talk about the fact that this is not a way to make us safer. In fact, you can argue it's going to make us less safe by encouraging terrorism and alienating the population.
So the three politicians and the former Secretary of State that we just heard setting up this clip, they're wrong. What do they base their information on? That if we're not there with a troop surge, if we're not there with a heavy presence, that we're going to get hit again?
I think it's religious belief in some supernatural idea that every problem is a military problem, and therefore everything you solve it with a hammer. I think that, I don't know how you could get up in the morning, Ed, with those people who you heard clips from, knowing the part that they played in the Iraq war, in the number of lives lost, in the billions of dollars, and they advocated for it, and here they are doing the same thing again. I actually think, though, it's a very important moment because the president's being pushed on the right by those, and it's important that those of us who don't accept that speak up loud and very clear and very strongly.
Okay, Rethink Afghanistan. You've got experts in there who say Al-Qaeda is not in Afghanistan. Well, where are they for sure, and why aren't we going after them there?
Well, one of those experts is General Petraeus, who we use the quote from. The reality is that Al-Qaeda is around the world in different places. They have to be, and again, progressives need to take a strong position about this, finding them, hunting them, capturing them. The way you do that is with international cooperation across countries. They don't stop at a border. The way you do that is working with police forces around the world. That's where there's been the most success. But the notion that you you go in and you occupy a country and then people are going to cooperate with you, it makes no fundamental sense, which is why we're so pleased to see that the president is rethinking the policy. He's going to take a lot of heat for it, but it's an important time to do it.
And Mr. Greenwald, your website so folks can see Rethink Afghanistan. What should they do?
They should go to rethinkafghanistan.com. They can see the clips, which are free. They can get the DVD. And we're having hundreds and hopefully thousands of screenings around the country. And we're asking people to invite a member of the House or their senator to see the film and ask the questions. How many troops? How much money? How long? What's an exit strategy?
Okay. Robert Greenwald, great to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ed.
For more on this, let's bring in our panel. Bill Press, nationally syndicated radio talk show host. Jack Rice, former CIA officer and radio talk show host. And also nationally syndicated radio talk show host Michael Medved, author of the book, The 10 Big Lies About America. Gentlemen, I want your take on the latest news this afternoon that General Petraeus is endorsing the request for more troops by General McChrystal. We'll start with you, Michael. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that President Obama should take that more seriously than advice from Joe Biden, the reports being that he's listening to the vice president rather than to his military commanders in the field. Look, I think conservatives deserve credit for supporting the president on this. One of the first things he did when he came into the White House was to send 20,000 more troops. He also campaigned very clearly on more focus on Afghanistan.
But if Al-Qaeda's not in Afghanistan, why stay there? Why send more troops? It might be the wrong mission.
Well, it's precisely the same reasons that President Obama gave during the campaign. Because we went into Afghanistan, set up a new government because Al-Qaeda was there originally with the training camps, and now to abandon that government under pressure would be a disaster for the United States.
Jack Rice, how credible would Mr. Baer's information be at this point as a former CIA expert?
I think it's really quite credible. I think the first thing we have to consider here is that Iraq is not Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a completely different animal. If we turn around and assume that if we roll more troops in, that's going to make a difference, I mean, contemplate just how much landscape we have to deal with. We have to contemplate just the fact that the Karzai government may be questionable at best, illegitimate at worst, and then we're trying to separate the question of Afghanistan. And I'm thinking about this as a former CIA officer. We have to separate this question of Afghanistan from Pakistan, and we can't do that. They must be looked at as a whole.
All right, the latest NBC Wall Street Journal numbers are this. 51% of the American people oppose a troop surge in Afghanistan, and also 66% of Democrats oppose Afghanistan troop surge. Take us down that road, Bill Press. What do you think?
I think for Barack Obama, this is the toughest decision he's going to face if he's there 8 years. Ed, look, I think this is his LBJ moment. And I wouldn't pay attention to the polls. I'd pay attention to what the strategy is and whether the strategy is working, where I'm President Obama. But he's either going to be remembered for delivering universal health care that's going to protect all Americans, or he's going to be remembered for delivering this country, taking this country into another unwinnable war.
Well, Bill, let me ask you this. We know, or at least it's been talked about by former Senator Bob Dole, that General Petraeus may have political ambitions. Here he is calling for more troops. Doesn't this box President Obama in if that's the case?
You know, the worst thing I think could box him in, Ed, would just be to take what the generals say and then run with it. That's what George Bush did. He didn't think it out. He didn't see whether the strategy was working. He just kept sending young men and women to their deaths. At least Barack Obama is stepping back and saying, wait a minute. Before we go anywhere, is this strategy working? It's not working. He's got to see that. And I think just shut it down.
Gentlemen, stay with it. Well, what do you, you're not agreeing with that, Jack Rice?
No, I absolutely agree. The bottom line here is you add 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 more troops. It is not enough. This is going to be a failed policy.
Michael?
Well, then the president should have spoken about that in the campaign.
Well, things change.
When you say things change, yeah, you become president and you take responsibility. And part of taking responsibility means we heard just a few weeks ago all the confidence he had in General McChrystal. I think that it will be a disaster for this country and this president if McChrystal has to resign because he's being dissed by the White House.
We had a president that would not change strategy based on conditions, and now we've got one that will. So we'll see how it works out.